before we start the discussion. So WICCI is actually the Women's Indian Chamber of Commerce and Industry. It's a premier national chamber for women, and it operates via 10,000 office bearers, and it's got over 600 plus councils. And we're all over India, and we mainstream women's voices and uphold women's interests in policy making and in all echelons of decision making. They also promote business networking and collaboration among members in the global community in order to enhance opportunities for professional and personal growth. The Rural Tourism Council of WICCI, which I'm a part of, consists of over 150 members, both nationally and statewide. And we hope to create awareness about rural tourism and build a network of women leaders who can contribute towards the development of rural tourism in India and have networks for collaborations and capacity building. Our partner for this event is Equitable Tourism Options, or Equations, who are a research and campaign and advocacy NGO working in the social, cultural, economic, and environmental impacts of tourism on local communities in India. So Equation basically works towards people-centered forms of tourism and policies that ensure that significant local benefits and takes into account also the negative impacts of an unbridled growth of tourism. Let me now introduce our panel members for this evening. First, we have Bhavani Arun, who is the General Manager at FCM Travel Solutions. She's a passionate travel professional who has over 20 years of experience in the industry. She has successfully developed and managed several leading global luxury holiday brands such as Royal Caribbean Cruises, Cosmos and Globus Insight Vacations, Luxury Gold Vacations, Silver Sea Cruises, Uniworld River Cruises, etc. And she's also worked with many leading travel companies such as Tirun Travel Marketing, Make My Trip, Via.com, etc. And she's a POSH trainer. She's a life coach and an NLP practitioner. And in her free time, she helps underprivileged children with their educational needs. We also have with us Joyatri Ray, who's the director of Equations. And as I mentioned, they are a research campaign and advocacy organization working on tourism as a development issue in India. She has also worked for over 20 years in this field and has developed an understanding of the way in which tourism shapes the lives of local communities, with a particular emphasis on gender mainstreaming and child protection. She has worked extensively to incorporate gender norms and child-safe practices in the private sector in general, and particularly in the tourism sector. And she's also part of the global network of civil society organizations working on women and child-safe tourism. Joyatri loves traveling. She likes meeting people, exploring different kinds of cuisines. She likes listening to old Hindi film songs over a cup of coffee and having a good conversation while she's doing that. And I think that is what we intend to do today, have a good conversation. Hopefully that will be stimulating and thought-provoking. And, we do hope that we hope to have about 40 minutes of conversation. And at the end of that, have maybe a 10 or 15 minute question Q&A session. And so let me get started without any further delay. So as you already know, the COVID pandemic has impacted not only health, but it has also impacted the world economy. And the travel and tourism sector is perhaps one of the hardest hit in the world. In India, pre-COVID, the industry amounted to about 10% of the GDP. So it has affected a lot of stakeholders across the industry. As India crosses the 100 crore COVID-19 vaccination mark, and with the COVID numbers decreasing and with the restrictions being eased by the government, there has been a slow, the industry has begun to get back on its feet. So the pandemic has actually given us all now an opportunity to rethink practices in tourism. So how do we do this? So should we let things go back to the way they were, or do we look at this as an opportunity to reimagine tourism? And how do we do this in the post-pandemic scenario to make it more equitable, sustainable, and people-centered? So I'd like to start with you, maybe Joyatri. I'd like to say that before we talk about reimagining tourism, could you give us a context as to what the tourism sector was like in pre-COVID times? In the sense, what worked and what didn't, and what were some of the issues that need to be addressed then and have to be addressed now?
Thank you, Priya. And good evening to everybody who is here. Let me also go back 2 years and see that what's happening, and maybe that would provide a context of this discussion, taking from what Priya has just said. It's been now 2 years, almost 2 years, and when this WHO came and declared that COVID-19 outbreak as a pandemic, and we've also seen at that time the world crash around us. It was almost seemed that it is kind of a prediction that the world is completely a standstill. We suddenly figured out that we cannot go out. We were in our own homes. Something like a social distancing, physical distancing, mask. We really didn't know this world at all, and everything come to a complete halt. But you know what? In spite of the odds and all that, we have also seen that there's this kind of a resilience as this humanity has come together to cope with this also this looming uncertainty. But one of the industry, that is tourism, which was actually a very, very labor intensive industry, has really severely got kind of impacted in this pandemic. So with this economic instability which we were facing currently due to COVID and all of it, we need to think about a longer time frame to achieve any kind of a normalcy. So if we just go back and see what really happened at the destinations where there was a over dependence on tourism, as tourism came to a standstill, and the statistics and numbers reflected the job losses of workers in industry, establishments of hotels, and various kind of restaurants. But several other sections of the population in destinations were also affected. Like, if you look at the most of the tourism sector is held together by a host of unheard voices, which is primarily the workforce, which is like the hawkers, the auto drivers, the artisans, also the small tour operators, vendors, guides from the tourism places and also the nearby villages who have been kind of dependent on tourism income and found it really difficult to cope with this income loss. If you see that this story is not only about one or two tourism locations across the country, we have seen this, across the globe we have actually seen this. So suddenly we actually found that themselves that on kind of a shifting stance where there is nothing seems to be fall back on. So one of the things that feel that one of the very primary thing that whether tourism can be something completely an industry which is kind of out of which is kind of a standalone. It is not. So if you look at from that perspective, tourism have to allow, does tourism really, the question really is that does tourism allow for a more diversified understanding of livelihoods, or it is something that it's kind of acts as a kind of a Benyanti approach, and it taking the livelihood from within its own sphere and try to kind of influence it. So everything in that tourism destination becomes only tourism linked and only tourism based. So that's, I think, is a question to be asked now, and was a question to be asked earlier also. Can tourism be the sole economy of a particular place? Because tourism itself has a kind of seasonality, has various kind of ways which may not be a sustainable options if you look at tourism being the only economy of the particular place. And other question that is also important, look at in what ways can tourism actually trigger the economy of a place and also contribute to the local economy in relation to in relation to the other economic activities where tourism becomes a little more mature. So these questions are actually kind of bring to us to also understand that can tourism has to be inclusive and sustainable. It needs to be also considering community as a primary stakeholder and to understand what is happening over there. So that was another point, whether community really, the question is to ask then and now is who benefits from, from tourism, and where does it benefit really goes. So from a very, very social, social, political, economic equity point of view, ecological equity point of view, where are we today really? And that's where I would stop now and then maybe have a conversation with you even more, going into each of these into details. And just to also add in this whole thing, earlier and now there's a big difference, big shift we see of also the solo women travelers. We look at a huge number of women travelers, and is tourism industry really geared up for that? Is also a question to ask. Question to ask that whether tourism has considered, tourism planning processes and decision makers considered women as a stakeholder in this whole process, whether they are traveler, whether they are being the people who are actually, women, those have been engaged in tourism activities and having a relationship with tourism in terms of entrepreneurs, and also women being the sheer resident of the place where this tourism activity happens. So I think these are the few of the questions that was there earlier, that is there today also. And it seems that it was a time when tourism industry has actually started to rethink some of these and kind of understanding that there maybe needs to be a local supply chain. There needs to be a connection with the local economy which already there, and there is no need to make it don't need to make everything which is linked to tourism. It can be a much more diversified economy, and in that tourism is also one.
Okay, yeah. Thank you for that, Joyatri. I think you actually, your response has actually raised a whole gamut of questions that actually we wanted to cover in this discussion. So I think it's very interesting that you brought it up. So I think Bhavani, actually, somebody who's actually in the opposite side of the spectrum from Joyatri, right? You're really represent the corporate aspect of it. So how has it been, for example, I mean, will you still be looking at business as usual approach, or has that now changed? And so how will organizations like yours actually play a role now in reimagining tourism? We've heard from Joyatri about, the various issues that if you look at it from a very rights-based perspective or an ethical perspective, how would you or your organization, look at this scenario, and what will change now?
Okay. Firstly, thanks, Priya. And thank you, Joyatri, for starting it on the right note, I would say. Though coming in from the corporate background, COVID has impacted everybody, and we all know the fact. And even from an organization point of view, the thought process, what was there pre-COVID and now, it's kind of definitely changed, because it's a learning, and a lot of things were taken for granted, be it in a personal life or professional life. All of us had taken a lot of things for granted. I think that was this has taught us a lot. One is definitely the kind of resilience we need to have in personally or professionally. Second, in terms of running the business, yes, we can't have the same usual business attitude, because that will not, because none of the companies or major companies had any fallback plan, right? For 2 years, almost 2 years, everything was on standstill. There were a lot of companies who had to shut shop, and some who had to let go a lot of staff, right? So this we have seen, and across, let it be from the tourism, hospitality, overall we have seen in the travel industry this happen. But it has taught the companies to prepare themselves and have a plan which will help them, the employees, and the people that they're going to network with. So sustainability here is very important. So currently what our company we are doing in terms of even holidays, let's say, for even clients who are traveling, are being very mindful, and we are educating thoughts on mindful travel than just for the sake of traveling. So we really don't want to get into that mode. Yes, the commercial aspects are good if for a larger organization to run in, but we also want to educate the travelers and inculcate a behavior or an attitude change if possible, wherein we can give back to the community, to the society as well. So we are into a lot of local tourism, because domestic is what is now being traveling, has been started. A lot of domestic travel has been happening. So we're trying to include in the itinerary some local community aspect of it, wherein we could even help them on the tourism part of it, bring in the local, be the local guides at main places. We're trying to use local guides. We are trying to use resorts or places which are more sustainable, who are following all the sustainable aspects of it and helping the local community over there. It could be to experience the culture, the cuisine. It could be a culinary aspect of it as well. So these are the things that we are really going down into and seeing that how do we support each other and how do we keep it sustainable. So this is what majorly our company is doing in, and I've heard this from other industry experts as well, that mindful travel and sustainable travel is what even corporates are putting forward in their aspects. And one aspect what we are seeing is no carbon prints. So that is also something that we are working on, saying that leaving no carbon prints. So we try and work with the down the lane supply chain who also have the same culture, or they have their second our thought, and they also work on the same line. So our vendor management and stuff are also gone into those details and see. We all understand that travel and tourism, especially for women who contribute almost 53% of the labor force. It could be skilled, it could be unskilled. If you look at it, largely women are there working in the travel industry. And this pandemic has really affected the women and the youth, because the employment opportunity that was there was higher for these people. And it did shatter most of their livelihoods, but people are back on their foot. They are thinking on that. So even from a company point of view, we ensure that women are there, the teams, the women who are there also are being coached, mentored, so that we can go through all of this very we'll be able to sustain it, and the opportunities are given are fair for women also in the industry.
Okay, thank you. I think that was you raised some very important points there, Bhavani, and we do hope that we definitely understand that the thought process has changed, and we do hope that that will be incorporated as practices on the ground, and will not just be something which is discussed in the offices or in the boardrooms of these organizations, but will actually be mainstreamed into the on the ground. So Joyatri, I think you had earlier talked about the fact that tourism cannot be looked at in isolation. It cannot be looked at as a silo, because there are so many other aspects that are impacted by and impact tourism in turn. Other developmental issues, whether it be health or we've definitely seen the impact of the pandemic, or it could be the education and the awareness, say, of local communities. It could be livelihoods, of local communities who are dependent on tourism. So how do we ensure that all these aspects are taken into consideration now? Like I said, both in terms of coming up with an overall policy, but also ensuring that it's operational on the ground. I think.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, a very important point to ponder upon, actually, I would say, because I think and that's the crux of the question, really, crux of the issue, really, that it's also good to hear. But how do we ensure that all of these things are actually been integrated with the operations of the various entities, which is tourism? And I think one of the things that comes to my mind as we speak to you is that, there are various segments of tourism. Like when you talk about livelihood, can livelihood be looked at from an integrated point of view? so that a hotel chain or a hotel or a particular operation, can it be also sourcing their various products? A part of it, I'm not saying whole thing has to be from there, but a major part of it can be from a local, local market. So by doing that, you're integrating many things. Yeah, you're integrating you're integrating several practices.
Mm-hmm.
You can integrate women over there, those who are making maybe there is a group of artisans, you can connect them. Maybe there is a whole lot of farming that's happening. You can also be taking your raw material from there. So your supply chain, if you make your supply chain and you are building so based on what is available locally, it also gives you a flavor of the place. A tourist also gets a flavor of the place and don't get the standardized standardized food that you get in every place that you go to. You really have to search for it. Like when I come to any place, I really have to search, saying that where do I get your food? Where do I get a Bundelkhandi thali? Where do I get a very nice vegetarian meal, which is really a Bhopal's, really a Madhya Pradesh speciality? Where do I get this? And I get a standard answer saying, "Ye to koi mangta nahi hai, yehi hai." So it's a menu which is standardized.
Oops.
I think,
We seem to be having a so
Can you hear me?
Joyatri, yeah, we can hear you, Joyatri. Please continue.
You have a lag.
We can hear you. Yeah, there was a lag. I think there's some issues with connectivity, but I think it's at least I can hear you now.
Okay. Okay, so I'll continue. And then, so I was just saying that if the supply chain can be worked out ethically and with sustainability in mind, lots of issues could be sorted out. It can sort out the issue of a local economy, supporting the local economy, issues of bringing community on board, those who can be part of the tourism supply chain. It can also be looking at from a perspective of various art and crafts that is already there. How do we bring that into it? So you can actually bring in those components of it in a larger manner. Once you also look at the local supply chain, you also have to build the skills of the people over there. So your skill building also take a different shape and nature. You're not looking at always people from outside, but you can actually develop that particular region where your operations are and get the people from there to talk about their own local and their own heritage, their own cuisine, their own things. So I think important factor is to look at how do we integrate the very specific uniqueness of that place to give a flavor. And once you do that, then your tourism as a brand also gets a different flavor, and your local economy can also get supported because you're building it up on the basis of your local resources and availability of the chain over there.
Okay, thank you, Joyatri. I mean, though it went off a bit, but I think we got the general gist of how, I mean, we need to kind of ensure that the local flavor, the local culture, and also ensure that that is integrated into the whole process, and also ensure that the supply chain also is kind of taken into consideration locally if possible. So Bhavani, I'd like to actually, based on what Joyatri said, I'd like to know, and she also talked about the unorganized sector earlier. So from an industry perspective, how easy or difficult is it to actually integrate this into the whole framework? Because, it's really sounds very good. It sounds sustainable. And it's really wonderful if we could actually do this. But if you were to look at it practically, how possible is this? And how do you, coming from the background that you do, react to something like this? Do you think it's viable and feasible on the ground? Do you think it's possible?
So, Priya, it's going to be a, I would not say a Herculean task, but it is doable. If and only we take the initiative to start including it into the itineraries, I mean, into the holiday packages or travel aspect, and educating the customers, right? So what happens is there is a set of run-of-the-mill kind of destinations that everybody would probably do. And there are a lot of, let's take MP or even the Northeast, the Seven Sisters, or our own Karnataka for that matter. We only look at popular destinations and not the offbeat destinations, or go a little more rural into exploring the places. But in this 2 years, I think that is what most of them have done individually. When they have traveled, they've tried to explore the unexplored places. And when customers are now clients coming to us, they say that, okay, give me something which is not crowded. One, everybody wants which is not too crowded as a destination because of the restrictions and the thing, so which is in a way good. And this also makes us to think on think on our feet as to how do we make it interesting. So one of the thing that we have been doing is to include, I think the food is one common factor that everybody loves, most of them love. And then that also talks about the culture, the history behind, because food also has a lot of history onto how things have been made. So we are trying to include local food flavors, not the typical masala dosa or a rava idli or your thali peet, those kind of thing, but more traditional food, which is only available in those regions, and it is only cooked by the localized from those regions. So if you're doing a Udupi belt, it's just, and Udupi is a flavor for a non-vegetarian. I mean, it's heaven for vegetarians. But what else can we do apart from the Manglo buns? What else can we do apart from that? So that is the thing that we are doing, and connecting with localites. In the foreign countries, the farm to table concept has been like very well accepted. But in India, we're not doing too much of those farm to table of kind of experiences as well, or dining at a local's place, right? If you're in Chikmagalur, it would be so nice to go visit a localite, eat that hot akki roti with the curry that they normally do, which is a traditional food or a typical staple food that they taste. So these are the kind of experiences that will enhance rural tourism for us, and also give flavor to the traveler to understand the region much better. And it couldn't be better than the food to know the region better. So that is why we're trying to include this as one meal in the itinerary. We put in saying that it's a special local delicacy kind of a experience. It could be a sweet, it could be a savory. So we try and include those. And if people are open to dining at a local's place, we kind of make those arrangements. So for that, the product team does work into the background and see, because we need to vet a lot of things, and we need to ensure that they also follow our they match our guidelines, the systems that they have been using, who are the people that they have employed, the source of, if it's a farm to table, the concept is it should be within the 1 kilometer or maximum 2 kilometer grown food. That is the farm to table kind of a concept, not getting imported and then having it at their place. So we ensure that it has to be a local flavor, because a farm to table is within that 2 kilometer radius or 1 kilometer radius, what is locally grown, right? So those are the parameters that we also look into and want to promote this in a better way, so that people also understand that Apna Desh has a lot of stuff to offer in terms of culture, in terms of cuisine, in terms of history as well. Yeah. Okay. So it will take time, because not everything, as I said, the commercial aspect of run of the mill will still be there, but slowly this is also gaining more popularity among the youth, or even I would say retired or baby boomers kind of travelers also want to experience the local flavors.
Okay, so Joyatri, I think what I wanted to actually ask you about was that how, for example, I think I read it on your website, where the United Nations World Tourism Organization talks about tourism being for inclusive growth, and it says that this now there's an opportunity to look beyond tourism statistics and acknowledge that behind every number there is a person, right? So what I wanted to know is what does this entail, and how can you kind of ensure that any practices that and any policies that come up with sort of ensure that this qualitative human angle is taken into consideration, and it's not just the economics, though of course economics is a very big consideration for everybody, irrespective of who the stakeholder is, whether it's the big players or the smaller people or someone on the ground, the communities. But how do you ensure that the person and his requirements, I mean not just economic but social or his right-based requirements are taken into consideration?
Thanks, Priya. Let me just start by reading out what the UNWTO Secretary General have said in August 2020 on this. Maybe that would be a good starting point. He says that tourism is a genuine driver of solidarity and development. Let us all fully harness its power to bring people and communities together, abiding by the global code of ethics for tourism. This way, tourism can keep delivering better opportunities and sustainable development for millions across the globe. If you see this statement and then you look at what really it means, it is ethical practices or ethics in tourism is not really something that's coming up today. It's been adopted by the General Assembly of the World Tourism Organization in 1999. So we are not talking about something which is really a post-pandemic or a post-COVID kind of a situation. It's actually been there, and it's been reiterated in a different way now as we are rethinking, and because tourism has come to a complete stall, we're saying, hey, we need to look at this in a much more stronger or much more critical or much more or in a much more strong manner, with much more seriousness. So I think first of the thing, if you look at ethics, it talks about that it's a mutual understanding and respect between peoples and societies. And I think that's really the crux. What it says is that the understanding and the promotion of the ethical values are the common to the humanity. So it is very important that the mutual understanding is there between the people and the societies, and tourism contributes towards that. It also looks at issues of fair wage. It looks at the labor issues. It looks at actually things like what would it mean? What is this tourism workforce? What is the whether there is women in the tourism workforce or not, or if there are women, is there a equal wage? If you are looking at things like health, looking at education, because just let me take an example and explain this. In most of the cases, you will see that there's a whole lot of tourism development taking place in planning happening, infrastructure development happening, a huge promotion to make that tourism, make one place as a tourism destination. Now, in doing that, we may have lots of infrastructure creation, other things to make sure that the tourist who coming in has a pleasure, has a good luxury trip, or has a comfortable stay. But in doing that, if we are not considering the people living there, and if you're not considering that whether people living there are also having a decent life over there, then the whole purpose of tourism is actually kind of negated. Most of the cases you will see, we like to go to very rural places where there's nothing as tourists. But just think of the people, those who are living there. They often don't have a better medical facility. And we have seen in COVID what really happens when you don't have a strong healthcare system. We have faced that. Often we see that there is no educational facilities for children. But we see there's a huge airport, which is also kind of sometimes non-functional and non-operational because no flights are actually coming in or departing from there. We have a huge convention hall, and we are saying let's promote it for the tourism location. So the point that I'm trying to bring into this conversation is that ethics is not really something that is kind of a esoteric in nature. Ethic is an integral part of a human behavior and human activity, and that we do. So there is anything you look at the thing of looking at a safety of women and children. Are we really looking at that globally? We know that there are areas, there are issues where women, the tourism destinations or tourism promotional materials have actually made women vulnerable in many ways. Are we looking at that when we're promoting tourism? What are we promoting? What is the message that we are giving? One side we're talking about talking about women's empowerment. Other side, if you're looking at a tourism promotion, sometime we're talking about certain things which are not really going with the with the national agenda of women's empowerment. So look at the child, what's happening. You will see that across the globe we have found out that children are vulnerable in certain cases. Not that all tourists are doing it, but that 1% who uses tourism infrastructure, who uses tourism facilities to come to various countries to exploit children for a different purpose, for sexual purposes, is actually giving a bad name to the entire industry. And how do we really look at that? That's another ethical consideration. Are we blind to those? Can we look at the positive aspects? Can we also look at what has been the challenges? And can we work on that? And that is the only way we will strengthen it. The other fourth part of it is that looking at how do we really ensure that women entrepreneurship is actually been, it is kind of easy for women to become entrepreneurs in the tourism sector. I hear that there are lots of challenges that the women entrepreneurs face. Anyway, women face various challenges, and when the women entrepreneurship is coming up, they face a different kind of challenges when they're trying to work on tourism activities. I was just meeting somebody from Uttaranchal who has been working on adventure tourism, and she was sharing with me how difficult it was for her to actually get into the adventure tourism, because that was a man's forte. So why will a women, So I think it's important to also now figure out that do we want to remain like that, or do we really want to bring in, because if you look at the UNWTO conversations or the conversation that's happening in our country as well, we're talking about women's empowerment, we're talking about women's entrepreneurship. So can we make it a little more easy for them? Can we make it easy for us to actually hold those forts as well? Is also a question to ask to all ourselves and all to the industry. Last one that I wanted to bring our attention to the ethics is that I think the workforce, labor, and unorganized labor in tourism has not been acknowledged as part of the tourism ecosystem. And I think that tourism is characterized by unorganized labor, whether you like it or not. When we go to a place, the artifact selling people are primarily street vendors. They're often not organized sector people. We go to those little small shops where we go and have tea, and we would like to do that as tourists, but that forms part of our tourism experience of a particular place. But are we acknowledging them also as as tourism workers? Are we also looking at what could be done? What do we do? How do we look at it? Guides. There are guides, those who are registered, there are guides, those who are unregistered. And how do you really look at that? Because this is all forms part of a tourism experience. So I think it's important to also look at labor practices as a core issue of tourism. And how are we really relating to that? And what have we done during COVID? How did we support them? What did we do? And I think that's something that yes, there are lots of experience of good practices as well in this field, where the industry has actually taken up a skill building as a very core thing to work with the labor force. But there are also examples where it shows that it was not done quite well. So I'm not saying it is only one way. Both ways we see it. We see some of the tourism tourism companies have really worked on it, and have innovated their way of working to have their have their labor force equipped to deal with when when the tourism market opens up again. Some have also treated them very badly. But again, the unorganized sector that we're talking about, actually nobody looked at them in a tourism destination. They were left alone. They were left to fend their own means.
Right.
So I think that's the question. Like, what are we talking about when we talk about tourism? Is it just about going to a place and coming back, or it is an entire ecosystem that actually gives you the vibe of a place? Whether it is an auto driver taking us somewhere, whether it's a taxi driver taking us, whether it's a small chai kade, it's a very small tea shop, it is a it's a whatever it is, every bit of that place actually gives us a vibe, whether we want to go back or we want to go back and say that, hey, it's a nice place, why don't you also go?
Right.
And this is only possible if we are looking at tourism as an integral part of the development of that particular place. If you look at tourism as an industry in isolation to that, what is needed in that place, then it's not serving the ethical considerations, because we're not looking at, we're talking about achieving SDG goals, sustainable development goals, and we're connecting that to the sustainability parameters of tourism. In a place like many of the states of our country, which has world famous tourism destinations rather, have malnourished children.
Yeah.
We are still fighting malnourishment. We are still fighting issues of not going to school dropouts, child labor issues. So all this also shows that the economy of the place, or the livelihood options, is actually not supportive, which can also ensure that other priorities of a family can be taken care of. So if we really want to make tourism sustainable and ethical and people centered, it has to be built on the context of the local people. I think that gives also a different a very different understanding and very different ways of tourism, building tourism.
Thank you, Joyatri. I think that was, it was a very passionate discourse on what, ethical and people-centric tourism actually is. And it is very true that we don't look at these, often, sort of forget that the unorganized sector, consisting also of, say, women, minorities or children, actually form a vital part of the sector, and how they've been impacted by COVID. And really their considerations haven't, their needs haven't really been considered. So I think that brings me to my next question, and maybe both of you can address this, is that, so how has the, the government has obviously looking at reviving the tourism sector now, and they've come out, with various policies and practices. Have these aspects actually been taken into consideration in whatever new frameworks and policies that they're coming up with? Have they been considered? How do we actually look at these the communities, not just the communities, but these special groups? And you're looking at whether it's looking at disadvantaged people, you're looking at women, or you're looking at children, because often they are the most vulnerable and the most exploited, right? So how do we actually ensure that these people are also taken into the fray? And Bhavani, I also wanted to know from you, from the industry perspective. We were talking about women empowerment also earlier, I think in one of our earlier conversations. So how's the, are you kind of providing some special training, or is there a focus on women? Joyatri had also talked about women travelers. So you actually have women on all sides, on both sides of the spectrum, right? We have women as travelers. We also have women as providers of those services. And often, and they're on different rungs of the ladder, right? They could be, women who are actually working in very organized, entities, or they could be women from the unorganized sector. they could be employees with various travel institutions and so on. So I'd like to hear, from both of you. Maybe we could start with Bhavani on this and then go to Joyatri.
Fine, Priya. Yeah. So yes, there are a lot of women, even in the down the line. If you see the channel that we use, and there are a lot of women employed in the unskilled or the unorganized sector in tourism related thing. So earlier there were programs that were given wherein they were trained on a little bit of the do's and don'ts, that they should know where to say yes and where to say no, because that was one of the main constraints in the unorganized sector, because they are not too sure of how if there is a community of people, people coming in the local community. Let's say if it's a homestay at a remote location and there are a lot of local people employed over there, we used to ensure that there's no any kind of exploitation that is being done. So there were a lot of most of the people who run these homestays, they were put onto workshops to make to give an education, be it on the POSH aspect of it, because even any employment in India, whether organized or unorganized, people don't realize that POSH can be covered. It's a working for working environment, whether you're directly or indirectly employed also. So those kind of things were done by some of the part of some programs that I was also there with. So these kind of education is very important, especially in the unorganized sector, for the women who are working. One is on the safety aspects of it, do's and don'ts, to know their rights, and even the labor wages. Okay, there is a disparity. People really don't know how much is their actual wage thing, because there are no proper guidelines given, and even if it is given by the labor law, it's not being really followed and practiced. So these kind of sensitizing people on these issues and spreading awareness is one of the primary factor that even corporates have started taking up CSR activities to educate some of these kind of segments. So we have proposed some things in company where CSR activity could be related to tourism, educating and training people in the tourism from the unorganized sector. So that is something that we're working on. We're looking at, and wherever possible through our network of people also, we try and do those. And now most of them are available online, so it becomes a little more easier to connect with people and spread the awareness. So that was one part of it, and creating the awareness part. And definitely the skilled labor, what Joyatri said, that is also very important in the unorganized sector, to give them a little bit of skilled development training. So that is also there as part of CSR activities. We try and include those. Then coming into the women traveler aspect of it, because solo travel for women has been popular and it is gaining a lot of importance. So even when we're organizing such kind of solo travel aspects, yes, we do give, because one, as a woman, even I have the safety constraints, right? So we know that we need to follow certain things when you're traveling alone. So we do give those guidelines to clients who are traveling on solo. Am I audible enough?
Yeah, I think it went off a little, but now I think we can hear you.
Okay. Yes. So I said, so the women solo travelers is what I was discussing last. So for solo travelers, when they come in and the destinations that they choose, or even a trekking part of it, or any kind of a thing, we do look into the aspects, give them the guidelines, ensure that they do follow certain protocols. We give them those kind of educational things that are needed for a solo traveler, because safety is utmost par importance for us. So that's like the priority for any guest, be it just not only women or the other gender as well. So we're sensitive on those part of safety constraints. So we do that diligently, and we do say no to certain destinations, given the fact that because of whatever it so we do recommend, we suggest clients accordingly to take up destinations based on it. We act like counselors at that point, if I'm not wrong. So we do the consultations with them and suggest them. So
okay. All right, thank you so much for that, Bhavani. I think As Joyatri mentioned, she sent me a message, and rightly so, that we are like, running out of time and we have just about 10 minutes left. I have one more question, though, and then I think we can perhaps go on to the questions which our audience may have. And that's, Bhavani, you talked about CSR activities and, being able to actually looking at CSR, trying to actually raise funds to look at activities related to tourism. But I was also wondering about corporate being accountable. For example, they're looking, corporates do, go into various areas, some of them sensitive zones, and they talked about green tourism, or they talk about ecotourism. They also talk about being very eco-friendly, ensuring that, and saying that they're helping the local community and so on. But sometimes the question is, are they really doing this in a sustainable manner? Or is it, something where they're just saying that they're doing it, but, how sustainable are they? And, how can this sort of be regulated, and also ensure that, that the needs of the communities are taken into consideration, just not in terms of giving them employment, but how much does the community actually have a say in terms of, what it can be done, especially if these are very eco-sensitive zones, and these are areas where you have to be careful about the environment and so on. Because I've seen, for example, I've been to resorts who would say they're eco-sensitive, but then you'll find that in the night they have a big bonfire and they're blasting this loud Hindi music, and this is in a forested area. So, it's just that it seems to be done in a very superficial manner. So I would like to know your thoughts on this.
I would not completely deny to that fact that it does happen. The only way to probably curb this a little bit would be to educate the travelers. I think that is the most important thing, because somewhere everybody looks at it from a business point of view, but if I'm the consultant sitting over there and it's a group of people that has come in and they're choosing, let's say, like what you said, a forest area, and they said, I need a gala night dinner, I'm going to openly say, you can stay there, but I'm not providing you a gala dinner. That's not happening. Because of the reasons that you are going to be in a sensitive zone, and this is the curfew there. I mean, that's the thing. You cannot play music, you can't have loud. We are entering, we are, in the zone of somebody's live ecosystem. So we are invading their privacy. It could be the animals, it could be the things. So that's the stand that one has to take. But sometimes, yes, it does not happen, Priya. But I think if we regularly create that awareness, and personally also, if I say single-use plastics, I personally don't use them. In offices also, we ensure that there are no single-use plastics that we use. And when we are having a get-together, we ensure we buy stuff which are recyclable. So that is the level of thing that we get into on a personal level. And if it is like I said, if you're vetting the resorts or if you're checking, then we do check that they also follow the same thing. So if it is not, then we don't say it is an eco-tourism that we are providing, so we tell them that you don't have to brand yourself like this. Then we are going to take you as a normal commercial resort. Then you need to provide all a 4-star or 5-star luxury that has been given. If you're saying you're eco-tourism and you're sustainable, then these are the things. So we do draw the lines over there wherever possible, but it is still at a nascent stage, I would say. It's a long way to go for people to really take this up and understand that Mother Nature has been really kind to us, and if we could only help to nurture her better and give it for the future generations ahead. If all of us have that thought, I think the planet Earth would be much better. She would be breathing much better, I would say.
So on that note, I think, and it's very eloquently stated, Bhavani, I think I'm going to maybe read out some questions from the audience. So we have a question from Rashmi Singh, and she basically says regulations were or are not identical across all kinds of tours. Spiritual tourism has had a lot of advantage. How do we ensure that government rules are consistent? So, Joyatri, would you like to answer this, and then I can ask Bhavani to also comment.
I just want to say, I just want to bring, I think let's not, I think let's make government also at levels. And I'm talking about now the destination level, governance. And if the local government is actually working on this kind of issues, if the local government is actually been able to regulate, monitor, actually leverage the authority and the power that is given to them to manage these various kind of tourism entities or tourism services there. I think that's one part, one way to look at it, because this is also why I say this, because the local government, the idea is that there will be a community consultation, there will be a Gram Sabha, or there will be something which will inform the kind of decision that which will be taken by the local government. So that's one part. Second thing is that I kind of agree that there are differences. It depends on the particular tourism policy of the state, the kind of branding that's coming up, the kind of tourism that is being actually pushed in that particular state as well. So these are all the factors, and this is something that I think we discuss. I think the now the MOT sustainability roadmap is something that is at least a starting point to have a conversations on that. I would say it has been if we can look at from that perspective.
Right. And Bhavani, would you want to add to that?
No, I think she summed it up pretty well.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Thank you. And there's a question also from Merin Phillips. And this is for you, Joyatri. And she's asked, she says that you've raised some relevant issues which no one in authority is addressing. And she wants to know if there's anything that the social development sector can actually do here.
I think social development sector can do quite a bit of things, quite a great job actually. One definitely is to have evidences of one is definitely the data. Second thing is segregated data that we need. Second thing is to look at evidences where we also have practices that has been done by the tourism fraternity differently, and practices that are harmful as well. Both ways. Something that is good that has been done by the fraternity, and something which is going to be harming and which is not going with the either the country perspective or from a global perspective as well. Third thing, I think what we can do is there are instruments that has been done by that we already have. There's a global code of ethics, which is a global instrument. There is also an Indo for the Indian tourism industry, we also of 2010. So I think there are instruments done by the tourism industry, like as I said, by the UNWTO and all of them. And how do we make sure that those have been implemented? So we can play a role there as well in actually making industries accountable to implement what they're passing in these various meetings of theirs own. Because this has been an industry-led process. This was not a CSO-led process. But CSO can play a role in actually saying that it is your code and you have come up with that. And you have acknowledged and realized that these are some of the impacts of tourism, and that's what you wanted to do this. So can we implement it? So I think there are these things. And I think other thing is we talk about convergence. And I think CSOs has to also come together with different expertise to complement each other so that we can also address these issues comprehensively.
Yeah. I think the point you made about the code is very interesting. I'm not sure how much awareness there is about that in the sector. And I think that, this is... I guess if people want to know more about that, they can contact Equations directly regarding that, Joyatri. Is that so?
Sure.
Okay.
Sure. Absolutely.
All right. And there was also a comment by someone about backyard tourism, by Dharna actually, on backyard tourism. And I was wondering if Bhavani would be able to, she basically said backyard tourism is the need of the hour. So I was just wondering if you had anything to say about that, Bhavani. I mean, what are, what are your opinion? What is your opinion about backyard tourism?
Well, I think that was initially I just touched upon that, if we start to explore places, first look at options around us, right? So backyard tourism is nothing but what is approach just right there available, but we kind of neglect, or we are not neglect, we are not aware. Basically, we are not aware. So if somebody asks how many waterfalls are there in and around Bangalore, I'm clueless, frankly. But there are so many at just within a 60-kilometer radius, and I was kind of like, I myself was like surprised that wow, there are so many options to explore, be it on a weekend or even have a picnic spot in the backyard experiences. I think that kind of awareness is needed. But with what happens is, with the awareness and the popularity, then that beauty of that place, the charm also kind of loses. So it does have an advantage and a disadvantage too. I mean, there are both pros and cons to it. Backyard tourism, people have been open to that and are exploring on themselves. Most of them are doing, thanks to the digitization and the social media aspect, wherein people having, let's say, the followers are there, people who are promoting tourisms in terms of rural state-wise. Look at Karnataka, or even Kerala for that matter, and Gujarat. So they are promoting those destinations very well. So it would, that's what we as a traveler have to be sensitive enough, one. And when we are promoting these destinations, we also have to think about a lot of things on that. How do we harness this overall, right? If the ecosystem, so use globalization, digitizations, and all of this in a much more sustainable way forward. I think we need to put on our thinking caps and do this even from the corporate industry part of it, just not only talk and not do much, but I think it's time for action as well for us.
Okay, thank you, Bhavani. And I think with that, I think I'd like to say that, just thank you so much, Bhavani and Joyatri. It's been a very, very interesting and thought-provoking discussion. And I think the audience has plenty to mull about. And, and I think several very important points were raised. One is that actually there has to be a shift in the way tourism will now be practiced on the ground and in terms of policies. So basically, there has to be more of a buy-in from the community, and there has to be, especially from the vulnerable sections or the unorganized sector, whether it's women or children, they have to understand their needs more and try and see how they fit within the larger framework. And I think the other thing also is that, Bhavani, it was very interesting to get the corporate perspective on this and to understand that that you are looking at more sustainable ways of doing this, looking at more inclusive approaches to actually planning itineraries, whether it is for the traveler or whether it is for, people who are working in the sector. And so I'd really like to thank you both for your time. And Joyatri, thanks for initiating this. And I mean, we at Wiki are really happy that we could facilitate this discussion along with you. So thank you both very much. And I look forward to, future sessions on this, because there are so many different areas that we can talk about, I think. And so perhaps we could have more discussions on this later. Thank you both so much.
Thank you very much for this opportunity as well. Thank you very much, Priya and Sahana, for this. Thank you.
Thank you, Priya and Sahana and Vicky and Equations. Thank you, Joyatri, for having me over. It's so humbled by this, and definitely a lot to know and a lot to understand on how we could together make this place a better one to live and to travel and explore, because traveling is a part of an education. And if we could do it right, I think that will set the grounds for the future generations to come as well.
Okay. Thank you, Bhavani. So with that very nice, statement at the end, I will end this discussion. And we are recording this. So if anybody would like a recording of this, please do let us know and we will send you a copy. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye.